History really does repeat itself. Straits, oil, and economic vulnerabilities. It happened years ago. Let's examine it together. There are certain moments in world history, seemingly small yet enormous in their consequences. A pipeline shutting down, a sea route falling under threat, the price of a barrel of oil doubling within just a few days. Such a moment occurred in the early 1970s, and the shockwaves it created continued to be felt for decades. Today, some economists are saying the groundwork for a similar scenario is being laid. The causes are different, the geography partly different, but the mechanism is familiar to a troubling degree. What happened back then? In 1973, a political crisis in the Middle East transformed into a global economic catastrophe within just a few weeks. Arab oil exporters imposed an embargo on Western nations. The result? Crude oil prices nearly quadrupled in a short period of time. But here's what's truly interesting. The crisis didn't just affect pump prices. Pump prices were only the visible part. The real damage ran much deeper into the economy. Factories slowed production. Lines at gas stations stretched for miles. And those lines sometimes ended in fights, sometimes in darkly comic scenes. People could only buy fuel on certain days of the week, determined by their license plate numbers. Inflation shot into double digits. Unemployment rose. And all of this happened simultaneously, prices rising while growth stalled. Economists gave this condition a special name, stagflation. Why is stagflation so dangerous? Because none of the classic economic policy tools work. You cut interest rates to stimulate growth, and inflation gets worse. You raise rates to fight inflation, and the economy grinds to a halt. Two fires burning at once, but only one bucket of water in your hands. Back then, most people thought the crisis was just a gasoline problem. They were wrong. Oil is the circulatory system of the modern economy. Not just for cars, it's used in fertilizer production, which affects food prices. Plastic is made from petroleum, heating, electricity generation, transportation. All of it is connected to oil prices in one way or another. When oil becomes expensive, nearly everything becomes expensive. After 1973, this reality revealed itself painfully. Supermarket shelves became more expensive. Buying an airplane ticket became a luxury. Small businesses shut down. The middle class watched their savings slowly eroded by inflation. And all of it had started not with a straight closing, but with a handful of countries cutting their crude oil exports. The straight question. Then and now. In the 1973 crisis, the threat played out on land, a political embargo. But geographic vulnerabilities that threaten the flow of oil have always been on the agenda throughout history. The Strait of Hormuz is the most critical of these, a narrow waterway, yet the volume of oil passing through it accounts for a significant share of the world's daily consumption. It's also a key transit point for liquefied natural gas shipments. Historically, the closure or endangerment of this strait has been the global market's greatest nightmare. Not just oil exporting nations, major importers like Japan, South Korea, India, and Europe are all dependent on this route. If the strait closes for a week, a temporary shock follows. If it closes for several months, an entirely different scenario unfolds. Between 1984 and 1987, during the Iran-Iraq War, tanker attacks in the Gulf triggered a serious crisis. During this period, known as the tanker wars, freight insurance costs soared to astronomical levels, and some companies rerouted away from the transit corridor. And this happened without a full closure. Uncertainty alone was enough. Markets don't wait for reality. One of the most striking lessons from the 1973 crisis was this. Markets didn't wait for the embargo to actually take effect. Just the news alone was enough to move prices. This is the fundamental nature of oil markets. Fear gets priced in before reality does. The possibility of conflict, a strait coming under threat, a major producer's capacity being called into question. All of this gets reflected in barrel prices long before anything materializes. This mechanism functions both as a warning system and as an amplifier. It can create a price shock far larger than any actual supply shortage. And once prices start rising, expectations feed a self-reinforcing cycle. Another distinct pattern visible in the 1973 crisis was investors fleeing towards safe haven assets. Equity markets entered a turbulent period. Defense industry stocks rose because the crisis would drive up defense spending. Gold prices reached historic highs. This pattern repeats itself in every period of geopolitical uncertainty. Capital flees risk. Airlines, logistics firms, retail chains, every sector sensitive to fuel costs, comes under selling pressure. And here's the irony of these movements. Markets are often priced not on what will happen, but on what might happen. Uncertainty itself carries an economic cost. Does history repeat itself? We need to be careful here. Historical parallels are not prophecy. There are important differences between the conditions of 1973 and today. Back then, the global oil market was far less diversified. The American shale revolution didn't exist yet. Strategic reserves were absent or very limited. Renewable energy was virtually non-existent. Today, major consumer nations hold strategic petroleum reserves. America has become one of the world's largest oil producers. Energy efficiency has improved dramatically compared to 1973. Economies use far less energy to produce the same amount of output. But this also needs to be said. These buffers are not unlimited. Strategic reserves are sufficient for months, not years. Shale oil can be produced quickly, but it can't instantly fill sudden supply gaps. And the global economy's dependence on oil, though reduced, remains deep. Perhaps the most important legacy of the 1973 crisis was a shift in thinking. Until that point, many economists and policymakers assumed the global energy system was stable and predictable. The crisis showed just how fragile that assumption was. And this lesson is universal. Systems that have operated without problems for a long time begin to look resilient over time, but most of the time they are simply untested systems. The Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal. These transit points have been operating smoothly for decades, but there's a very large difference between no problems so far and no problems ever. 1973 reminded us of that, painfully. And history shows that this lesson sometimes has to be learned again. This content is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not constitute investment or financial advice. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Take good care of yourselves. See you in the next video.